I'm here with Frederick Renz. Fred, whom I've known for a very long time, has done all sorts of things. He was a member of the New York Pro Music. He is the founder of the Early Music Foundation and currently, and for many years, the director of Early Music New York. He has performed all kinds of music from all periods. Hello, Fred. It's very nice to see you.
So nice to be with you.
Well, look, we're sort of interested in how people came to early music. Can you say a little something about how, I don't know, music first came to your attention, and how did the concept or the repertoire or whatever it is of early music get your attention?
So I'll go way, way back. We can start with my father, who was a wannabe violinist, and he kind of instilled in me the desire for music. And so an old piano was brought into the house, and I picked away. Then decided that I would take a music line in the teaching field. So I went to the State University of New York at Fredonia, and decided I wanted to be a teacher, not band, heaven forbid. Maybe orchestra might be more to my liking. That exposed me. I don't know exactly how it happened, but well, no, it wasn't until my first year of college. There happened to be a symposium, a faculty symposium, where I believe three professors who had simultaneous sabbaticals, and one came back with the double bass teacher came back with a viola da gamba, and the choral director's wife, who was a keyboardist, came back with a harpsichord, and the clarinet player came back with a recorder. And so they just determined that they would do a symposium on Baroque music. And that's when I was really first exposed to it. It was a revelation to me. I had no clue otherwise. Otherwise, it was all about teaching kids how to play trumpets and things. So I had the good fortune of joining a program, a semester in Europe. So I wound up, I don't know exactly, it was fortunate, but the program was aimed toward Holland, in which case I also became interested in the harpsichord, came back with a little Sperrhacke, ugly little thing, and played around with that in my undergraduate years. And then for graduate school, I decided, well, I'm going to learn how to play the harpsichord. So I went to Indiana University and studied with Marie Zorn, and started off by learning the Wanda Landowska style of playing, which was a bit of a curve. The piano technique kind of brought into the way you play the harpsichord. So, and then I became the harpsichord repairman, and I had these gigantic what's the name of the old harpsichords that were built like pianos? It escapes me right now, but I wound up having to.
Well, there were Erards, there were all sorts of, yeah.
Pleyel,
that's it.
Pleyel harpsichord, yeah. I try to wipe that out of my my past. So I learned the high finger technique, and really hammering at the keys. But I was exposed to wonderful repertoire. Got my performer's certificate in harpsichord. Not exactly why, but while I was in graduate school, Leonhardt came and played a recital. And again, I was a little bit oblivious. I'm a Leonhardt, Schmeyenhardt. I had no idea who that was until my history teacher, who became the director of Pro Music once Noah Greenberg died. He said, well, we're going to get you a Fulbright. Well, okay, why not? So I wound up going to Amsterdam for a semester and studying with Leonhardt, and then, oh, this is how you play the harpsichord.
That must have been a shock in a way, for Wanda Landowska to come in to Gustav Leonhardt to say, now show me how to play the harpsichord.
Exactly. Yeah. No, it just opened up everything. And I mean, there was so much to learn from him, not only just how to play the harpsichord, but how to articulate and meter, how to shape meter and all kinds of wonderful things. And of course, in Europe at that time, there was the Quadro Amsterdam with Jaap Schroeder and Anna Bilsma, Frans Bruggen, and Leonhardt. I remember, and I was actually sharing a windmill with Marty Perlman at that time. We were both on a Fulbright, and so I recall sitting up in the balcony of some wonderful acoustical church in some town in Holland, and they were recording. I think all the harpsichord concertos. That's a little vague to me, but that was a wonderful experience. So while in Amsterdam, I determined that I was just going to stay there. You know, I mean, that's great. I'll just move and stay there. But then I had an invitation to join the Pro Musica by my former professor at Indiana University, who became the director of the Pro Musica for a short while.
And that was?
When?
No,
Oh,
who
John
was that?
White.
Who was that?
Say it again.
Who was that?
John White.
Yeah, John Reeves White, just so everybody
John
knows.
Reeves, exactly, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So found myself in New York, of all things, New York City, which again was a bit of a shock, having been brought up in Western New York. But again, a wonderful experience. I think I was the third harpsichordist in the history of Pro Musica. First, there was Paul Maynard, and then Ed Smith, and then I was the next. Pro Musica decided after Greenberg died, a few years after Greenberg died, then the board said, well, this is enough. We don't really care to sustain this anymore. So the current members of Pro Musica and I formed Early Music New York. And, you know, history from there on. We're celebrating our 47th season now.
That's terrific.
You know,
So
and I remember telling myself that, well, at age 60, you know, enough of this early music stuff. You know, farm me out, I'm done. But here I am 20 years after that and still.
Well, so Early Music New York is the continuation in a way of the New York Pro Musica, and you and other members of the Pro Musica began it many years ago. Is that right? And you continue it as director.
1974, it was David Hart flute, Wendy Gillespie gamba, Danny Collins countertenor, and then it of course grew. There were other people. Gene Lemond was a member for a short time, of all things. So yeah, I mean, all these folks that I rubbed elbows with, I feel very fortunate.
Well, but then you have succeeded in setting up, in a way, your own organization. I know that there's an Early Music Foundation. I know that for a long time, you've had a residency in the Cathedral of St. John the Divine. And for a while, you had a group called the Ensemble for Early Music. For a while, you had a group called the Grand Band. I mean, you've had many different incarnations over the last several decades, haven't you?
Well, Early Music New York is the cover now. I mean, I learned the hard way that you don't try to promote something called the Grand Band and then something else called the Gleeman and then something else. Early Music in New York is just the shortening of the Ensemble for Early Music, and then we called it New York's Ensemble for Early Music, and that was just too long to put on a headliner, so we shortened it up. I think I got my lead from Marty Perlman when he went from Banquetto Musicale, that fancy word, into Boston Baroque.
Yep. Something that people can pronounce for one thing and people can remember for another. So one thing that's always interested me, Fred, is that is the great breadth of repertories that you've sort of mastered and performed and recorded. And in particular, I think I can remember you doing more than anybody else to bring alive medieval liturgical dramas. Lots of different items from the Fleury playbook, the play of Daniel, and other things like that you performed for the Metropolitan Museum at the Cloisters and other kinds of things. Can you say something about how you got into that and what that was like?
I think, well, you know, when I was at Indiana University, it was mostly, my exposure was mosely to the Collegium Musicum, which was some medieval, mostly Renaissance music. Although I had studied Baroque, my experience was in the earlier repertoire. Then when Pro Musica decided to hang up the hat, they had something called the Play of Daniel. I don't remember exactly. I think it was the cathedral who said, "Can you do the Play of Daniel?" And I said, "Well, I could do my version of it." So I kind of restudied the score and got it. And also, my interest isn't, I should concentrate just on, the music, but I get into production, scenery and organization, production. That was just my personality, I think. I needed to kind of see the whole picture and have my fingers in every aspect of it. But we wound up doing, I think, the extant medieval dramas. I think there were some small tidbits that we didn't put together or reconstruct, but yeah, the entire Fleury playbook, in fact.
Well, a lot of things from the, I know that in some of your cases, you put together two pieces from the Fleury playbook to call, the play of Nicholas or the play of Herod or something of that
Oh,
kind.
you've done your homework. That's great. That's great.
Oh,
Yeah, there are three small.
I'm a medievalist, Fred. I'm not somebody who actually knows how to do everything in the world, but it's very interesting to me because those things you don't get much information from the Fleury playbook. So it means that somebody's got to be a musicologist that takes it from the parchment all the way through to the public. And that's you, I guess. But that's an awful lot of creativity involved.
Well, I mean, that's, from my point of view, that's the need. I mean, you only have a certain degree of given information and you have to flesh it out. And I mean, that's the half of it. It's wonderful to explore the given, but then the other half is being able to create within it. And of course, one can go out on a limb and, get a little bit too creative. And that's always, one has to be very careful about how far you take something, particularly with a modern audience. I mean, you have to bend a little bit to what audience people who buy tickets are willing to sit down and hear and listen to.
That, of course, is one of the major aesthetic questions of our time, isn't it? I mean, there used to be purists who said, well, we're playing it the way they played it in the 18th century. Well,
as if we knew.
How do we know that? And if you say, I'm playing it so that it pleases me, then what you're doing is pleasing 21st century ears, which might not be the same as 17th century, and on and on and on and on.
Yes, that's the quagmire in a way.
But I remember with great pleasure and delight the Noah Greenberg's version of the play of Daniel, which was all full of stuff that was not in the Fleury playbook, including da 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 dum ba da dum ba da 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 da, and the
medieval dances, French dances,
yeah, right. And there was da 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 dum bum, all sorts of things that get woven in there. I remember the wonderful rhythms of various kinds that were applied to songs that clearly have a rhythmical text, but don't have any rhythmic notation of any kind. And the use of instruments that aren't specified or mentioned at all, and blah, 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 blah.
So the narration,
absolutely. So you stop the play from time to time and somebody comes out and explains what's
happening.
Yeah. And that's that in a way, you might say that's pandering to the audience. That's that sort of adding bells and whistles. And I'm not kidding, because there were bells and whistles and lots of percussion and all sorts of things. To something that's really very much simpler. We honestly, I guess, don't know that. I mean, that says this was put on by the boys of Beauvais Cathedral in honor of the saints or whatever. And that was a big moment. And you did similar things with some of the liturgical dramas that you performed, right? Except nothing is as fleshed out as the play of Daniel. The pieces in the Fleury playbook are much, much simpler, with no indication of rhythms or any of that kind of thing.
Well, the interesting thing is, if you follow the text, I mean, you realize that some of the texts or the poetry is in triple meter, some is in duple, and was my guide, and that's where I varied from the Greenberg version. I did use instruments, you know,
Yeah,
and you wonder, for at one point I'm thinking, well, back then, how somber was liturgy and what was happening in the church, and you read things about how things were probably not quite as sober as we think religion ought to be now, and that gave me a little carte blanche.
yeah. Well, I
But
mean,
I did not do the narration. I felt cutting up the play into segments was not for me. But
well,
if
I
people
think
can't read their notes, that's too bad.
you brought medieval music to many thousands of people who otherwise, unless they somehow heard Gregorian chant, would probably hear no medieval music at all. That's changed some, and there are a lot of people, a lot of very distinguished performers and ensembles performing medieval music, and now there's a great blossoming of Hildegard and all sorts of things. But
True.
I think you can take some credit for calling people's attention to the beauties and the great variety of the
Thank
music
you.
of the Middle Ages.
Well, all in that respect as well, I like to think that we've recorded the complete medieval dances as well in
Mhm.
our Estampie recordings, both Italian and French.
Yeah, but
And again, we created a Stan Kenton band with multiple of these strange early instruments. Perhaps, who knows for sure.
well, who knows for sure. Well, in more recent times, maybe I haven't been following closely enough, but you sort of returned to your Baroque roots. I mean, given that you started as a harpsichordist and stuff, although you've done music from all sorts of periods, I think you've done an awful lot of Baroque and classical in recent years with early music New York. Is that right?
I'm afraid so. Somehow my advancing years have somehow advanced my interest in history. A lot of it has to do with we've developed into a rather sizable organization, and I'm thinking back when we're only five of us, one on a part. This was great, and I played as well. But when you have a staff and you're feeding people, I mean, let those folks who specialize in medieval music, who have a group, a trio or a quartet, they can stand on their own and they can do their own thing with much more flexibility. So once we got larger, I was thinking, my thought was to do larger works. So that brought me into orchestra.
Sure. Are you also saying that you felt the need or the desire to program music that you think people will like, or put in a cynical way that will sell tickets or keep the pot boiling?
Or to compete with what seems to be popular in the early music realm these
Well, yeah,
days.
that too.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
medieval music is not, it's not having its golden age at the moment.
Yep.
Um, I mean, hard to say what my motivation is. I mean, I do like to just stand in front of people and tell them what to do. Also, I don't play as much. I mean, I don't practice the way I should. I don't these medieval portative organs and organistrums and clavicitheriums, they take more work to keep up than to actually practice them and play them. So I got a little bit weary of that and leaving that to those folks who only play the portative organ. But
Mhm.
I try to do everything while also putting an organization together. So I'm gearing more toward producing, as in medieval dramas or putting an orchestra together. And I try to do orchestra repertoire that isn't heard on the radio, every day. Go with the more lesser known but equally good compositions. And that's what we're going to be doing in March. We have a program called Bach Cousins, and we'll be doing some early cousins of Sebastian, Johann Christoph, Heinrich, And then we will do a contemporary cousin, Johann Bernhard.
Yeah.
And, you know, the JS piece, I thought, okay, you better put JS on the last piece on the program. And I said, no, you know, let's be equal. So Johann Bernhard is presented by an overture at the end of the program.
Terrific. Well, I wonder if you could do what you do other places than New York nowadays. I mean, you have a roster of people that perform with you on a regular basis, I know, but because your programming and the size of things changes, you also have to draw from a pool of people who don't make their complete living from their activities with early music New York. And so you've got to be in a place where you can either get people or get people to come to you, which of course it's becoming more and more possible in other parts of the world, but maybe New York is the one place where that's easiest to do. What do you think?
If not Boston, right?
Yeah, yeah, well,
particularly with the Juilliard program. I mean, there are professionals who come in to get themselves a degree, and so, you know, there's better choosings, you know.
you've probably noticed something about some people's preparedness over the decades that you've been making music with people and hiring people. A lot of the people I've been talking to recently have mostly remarked on how much higher standards are than they used to be when Americans began playing Baroque music on historical instruments. Would you agree with that?
Oh, I would absolutely agree with it. The only thing that I would not agree with is that the academic background, as far as people knowing treatises and where this all came from, I mean, that's not so much in favor anymore. When you go to a conservatory, that's great. You learn how to play the Baroque violin, but you just learn how your teacher guides you more or less. I mean, there are exceptions. There are students who go back to Leopold Mozart or Quantz, but I find that there are some principles that I feel are just not being addressed by some of the modern players. But countering that, they're just excellent technicians and they play really good. And if you play really good, you can, you know, get away with stuff.
So what do you think, if you had advice for young people starting out in historical performance and early music nowadays, what sort of advice would you give and what do you see for the field in the future?
Oh, that's a tough question.
I
I
know.
mean, I'll go back to the idea that not only do you learn how to play technically and not the old style. I mean, thank goodness now you're not having to shed some ways of playing that are no longer in favor. I mean, those people are learning to play with a Baroque bow right off the bat. But you know, going back to the treatises and learning, you know, tonguing techniques and bowing techniques, rather than just, well, this is the way my teacher does it. And it depends on who the teacher is. I mean, if they're a well-known violin teacher, then you're going to kind of pick it up that person's way and that person's proclivities toward emphasizing certain aspects of historical performance. So I would venture to say that, and it's happening now, you just play for different conductors and you know, pick the stuff you think is good to make part of your own and discard other things, but have a wider palette as far as how things are done supposedly authentically, or yeah.
Right. Be as flexible as possible, you're suggesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the people who come with great technique have, you know, they don't have to worry about practicing their technique. They can really learn how to discern styles.
Yeah.
And then go back to the treatise and say, well, love that style, but does that have anything to do with what the treatise says? And then the struggle between, well, making the treatise make sense to you, so it's as musical as if you didn't have to worry about being authentic.
Right. The minute you begin to worry about being authentic, you're not being authentic, of course.
Or that too, yeah.
Yeah, there's that problem. Well, Fred, it's great fun to get the opportunity to talk to you and to know that Early Music New York is alive and well. We look forward to concerts this spring. We look forward to many, many concerts in the future. We look forward to continuing to be educated and amused and delighted by the music that you've been doing for such a long time. Do you have any farewell words for young people in early music today?
Yeah, keep it up. We
I'm
need
for
you,
that.
yeah.
Great. Well,
We need
many,
you.
many thanks to you again, Fred Renz. It's a great pleasure talking to you. Thanks so much.
Well, I thank you very much for allowing me to shoot my mouth off.
Thank you, Fred.
Yeah.